Well, we're at an extraordinary moment in human history. We've been through Genesis, we are in Exodus, and Moses is about to climb the mountain to receive the document that has changed the face of the modern world, the Ten Commandments. So who was this Moses? Where did he come from? When Pharaoh commanded that all the Jewish children, the firstborn Jewish boys, were to be thrown in the Nile upon birth, Moses' mother put him in a basket, sent his sister out with him, and she set it into the Nile and stayed on the banks of the river and watched. Lo and behold, the princess from the royal palace in Egypt, the great civilization of that era at that time, happened to be bathing in the Nile and sees this basket and clearly is touched by this infant. And she takes him for her own, observes the child, the sister, on the banks, and the sister asks if the princess would like a wet nurse for the baby. Greatly relieved, the princess says yes. It was Moses' mother. So here is Moses, growing up in the luxury of the palace, not knowing a moment of want, accepted by the royal family, and the Bible even mentions that the Egyptians loved him, and with his own birth family. In that description of his growing up, there's not one word of tension, not a word. Protected, loved, cared for, had it all. So what happened? One day, he is out walking and sees an Egyptian slave master beating a Hebrew slave. And Moses, at that moment, feels a lightning strike into his soul that changed him forever. He was never to be the same. He could never return to where he was. And the next day, when he came to look at the area where his crime had taken place, it was the Hebrew slaves who said to him, "Who made you Lord and judge over us?" And he learned a lesson. He learned that even when you try to do good, you can hit the wall of parts of human nature that need to be sustained for goodness. It doesn't always come automatically. He ran away to Midian, knowing if he stayed in Egypt, they'd catch him. In Midian, he meets the man, pagan priest, who was to become his father-in-law. And he marries the daughter of that priest, a Cushite, a black woman. That outreach was the beginning of his understanding that whatever he would be coming to in his thinking was going to be inclusive of everyone in the world. The parallel between this beginning of his life and the history of the Buddha is so phenomenal, it warrants stopping and looking at. The Buddha grew up beloved of his father in a palace completely isolated from the outside world. Singing and dancing girls married off at 16 by the father to a beautiful neighboring princess who it turned out the Buddha loved. They had a little boy, 2 years old. And so protected was he and sheltered that when he would go out on his stallion riding or was carried out, his father, the king, would send runners ahead of him. So the child, the young man now, would never see anything untoward before his eyes. Sheltered. Every luxury, everything one could want, Gan Eden. Until, like Moses, one day by accident, he finds a sick old man who is dying on the road. He had never seen anything so awful in his life. And it changed him in the same way that Moses was changed in that instant. And he could never return to the palace either. Both these great leaders took different directions from the same starting place: human suffering. And each came around to answers that we still treasure and balance in our lives today. We are the fortunate ones that they could not return.